All right. Hello to everybody joining us today. It would be grand to kind of get an idea of who's with us. So if you are keen, go ahead and put your name and kind of where you're from into the chat. It'd be lovely for us presenting to be able to see your details. And we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Let a few people in, the stragglers. I'll say hello again for anybody who's just kind of popped in or are in the process of. It'd be great to see who we have with us today. So if you can put your name and what organization you're from into the chat, that would be grand. There we go. Hi, James.
Hi, James.
Thank you for paving the way. To give a wee kind of introduction, I'm Bethany Patterson from Flown Learning by Mapal, and I am the Learning Experience Manager. Kata, if you want to...
Yeah, no? I can say something about myself as well. Hi, my name is Kata. Actually, Katarzyna Szkopkowska, but that's quite long and difficult for everyone to say. And I am the Senior Implementation Manager / Digital Project Implementation Manager at Filtered. And I have been working there for 5 years now. And I'm really happy to see you guys here today.
Everybody, don't be shy. If you've joined us this morning, please do put your name and what organization you're from into the chat. We'd love to see you. And then if you have any questions while we're going through our presentations today, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll be doing some discussion type activities as well. So get used to kind of that comments button, because we'd love to hear from you. And answer your questions as we go along. But in the interest of time, because I don't want Kata to have to, edit anything she's saying, we'll probably just get cracking on. Kata, the floor is over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, hello everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to share some knowledge with you on curation and creation of content. I have been involved in content creation and curation ever since I started working for Filtered, and that's been 5 years now. Filtered as a company offers learning experience platforms and content intelligence tools. And both of those products are built on the back of curation, and we develop technology to do it in a smart way. But when Filtered was founded initially, we were offering online courses that I was involved in, and I was generally in charge of content creation and administration. And later on, when we shifted our direction to content curation for the platforms that we have and the tools that we have, that's what's my main responsibility at the moment. And that's why we are here today. Today we are going to talk about the curation and creation and the advantages and techniques for both. In terms of the agenda and the curation, what I would like to focus on today is the curation and why we do it. Some tips on curation, what we think is important, the objective, the audience, the topics of curation, what curation criteria we might think of, so what to look out for when curating. We are also going to talk about curation process, not in a very formal way. So basically where we start, how to curate, and how to do it effectively and efficiently. Before we start, I know that everyone is super shy, but I was hoping that I can get something out of you and ask away if you have curated or created anything recently and why. And if you can put your answers in the chat, that would be fantastic.
I know we'll talk about this later, but while everybody's putting their comments in the chat, I did a little bit of curation lately myself. I played a bit of an experiment where I asked Twitter what they thought of curation. So we'll look at that a little bit later on, but it was really interesting to kind of get people's thoughts and links to articles and a little bit of kind of that personal knowledge building with my personal learning network. Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, so James is saying that he shared an article about brain trust meetings with his team, and that's great. I generally think that curation for others can be very beneficial and rewarding. It's like almost like teaching something to someone. And because I'm a teacher, actually, it just feels so good when someone comes back to you and tells you, oh, okay, I learned something new today. So that's really nice. Okay, so moving on, what I want to tell you is basically the difference between content creation and curation. And I think it's quite obvious, but what I want to emphasize is that content creation is producing something written or something visual, the resources that our audience will find appealing and interesting. Whereas content curation is highlighting something that's already there, the great content that we can find online or out of the internet, and that our audience will find interesting and valuable, both in life, personal life, and professional life. And why I find curation so interesting is basically because majority of the content that we can curate online is freely available. Obviously, the content that's paid for can bring a lot of value to everyone, including the whole organization. But we have a lot of free content that we can share. All you have to do is find it. It's time effective, which is fantastic, because sometimes when you have to create something new, and if you don't have much of an experience to do it, it might take some time to think about the topic, to think about what's the content all about. So it's definitely time effective if you want to find something to share with someone else. We unfortunately are faced with content overload all over the internet, and that's good and that's bad. It has two. This coin has two sides. Some of that content is incredibly valuable, but the trick is to find it and share it. And curation helps us get out our people the right content at the right time in the most efficient way. People look for content every day. They learn all the time by themselves, for themselves, intentionally and unintentionally. And that's luckily one of our features. We are curious. And through social media alone, we consume hours of content each day. Like Bethany said, she tweeted something and suddenly we had a massive flow of answers. And that content is informal, educational, and almost all of which is genuinely consumed. Great. And curators are supposed to help direct that learning for topics they have identified as important to the audience they have. And I would say it's extremely easy because all you have to do is open a browser, and that's great. Bethany, by the way, like if you want to stop me and add in something, please do, because I might just talk and talk and talk.
It's perfect. Keep going.
Cool. So I want to talk to you about some best practices and what approach we take for curation at Filtered and why we find this process easy. First of all, I want to talk to you about the drivers and what drivers we have behind the curation. First of all, the objective. It's extremely important to set an achievable and measurable objective to guide your curation efforts. Please remember to refer back to the objective to make decisions on content you're looking at. You can obviously refine the objective throughout the project if you think it will be a better match for your needs. So, for example, we can set up an objective to curate 100 learning resources for the logistics department in a transportation company to improve the team planning, project running, or resources activity. The second thing we have to think of, so the second driver would be the audience. It's crucial to understand the people we are curating for. They should find the content useful and engaging, even if we don't. It happens to me quite often. And we have to think how that content can contribute to the skills, to their skills, and the general development of the people that we are curating for. And the last but not least, the topics. We have to think about what we want to achieve and what general topics would cover our need. So try to call the topics in a specific, clear, and comprehensive way, because this will help us understand and assess if the content that we have curated is relevant and useful to the audience and to the general learning need that we have. When we curated filtered, we set out 2 types of criteria that help us decide on content effectively and efficiently. And those are technical criteria and quality criteria. To start with, let's talk about the technical criteria. And what I mean by that is to establish a set of criteria to apply to our content. This acts as a guiding set of principles that will help you or me include or exclude content from the curation set we have identified initially. And this should be based on the needs and priorities of our audience. So please do remember about those drivers that you set up at the beginning, because you will always go back to that if you hesitate on any piece of content. And those criteria, luckily, can be applied just by looking at metadata rather than the substance of the learning resource. So you don't have to read every piece of content that you curate, if you have to curate, let's say, 200 of them. And among those criteria, I listed out the format of the content. So if it's an article, if it's a video or a learning course, it all depends on the audience and what preferred formats there might be. The length of the resource, so you have to think about how much time your audience will have to consume a piece of content. They might have 2 weeks to learn something new, but they also might have a 15 minutes break during lunchtime. Think about the providers, so the sources where you look for the content you want to provide to your audience. So those would be some well-established providers, libraries that you know that your audience might recognize, something that they will trust. Think about the access. So think about the libraries that are either freely available and everyone can access it, or think about the subscriptions or any other paid-for libraries that your audience might need. So who is going to pay for the subscriptions? Are they okay to use the free trial that the provider would offer? It's entirely up to you how much time they will need to spend with that one provider. And the publication date, it's really important to provide people with something that's relevant and up to date rather than something extremely old. And I do have
before you move on, can you just describe like metadata? Is that just keywords, or what is the metadata supposed to kind of give you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, that's what I wanted to show you on this slide.
Oh, great.
So the metadata is what I mean by that are the basic information about the content. So that would be the title, a short description if available, because if you curate from an open libraries, you should probably always be able to source that out from the provider. The publication date, who is the provider, what's the format of the resource. So if it's a video, if it's a learning course, or an article, there are some really good infographics online, some really good presentations that people can source out. So it's really worth to dig out all of those and check what's interesting. And then the keywords, like you said, Bethany. Keywords help us a lot with identifying if the content that we found is useful for our audience and topics that we have identified initially as one of our drivers. I do have two resources here on this side, on this slide, to show you that one of my favorite, Financial Times. It's a great provider, but unfortunately, you have to have a subscription, and you can share some of the content from time to time, but usually you have to basically log in. So think about if your audience will be able to get into this website, if they will be able to access it. If not, there is plenty of other content that you can find on similar topics, and it will definitely be useful as well. And then a video on YouTube, fantastic. Brexit, we all know that word, the B word that we don't want to use any longer. But if you take a look at the publication date, it's been quite a long time since someone published the video. So it might be quite out of date. The information might be irrelevant. So it's worth keeping that in mind, that something might not be useful any longer. And then moving on to the quality criteria that I mentioned some time ago, we establish a set of criteria to apply to the substance of each learning resource. So we use this when we are curating to make decisions whether to include the asset or not. And we usually ask ourselves, does it or is it? So does it cover a topic from the list? Is it business useful? Is it visually appealing? Is it evidenced? And what I mean by that is, can we trust this resource, and is it telling the truth, or maybe that's just some sort of a lie that we found somewhere? And is it original? And what I mean by that is, don't curate 10 resources that are on the same topic. For example, top tips on project management. You only need one good one that people will find useful. 10 of them might be a bit of overdoing. And independent. And what I mean by independent is, don't try to find resources that will try to sell the product. Obviously, there are learning resources that are provided by a product company, a SaaS company, and they do create really good articles or videos on general knowledge. We do that at Filtered quite often, but those can be very useful as well. So, for example, I have an article about running meetings, and Asana did a really good job with this article, but they do have some tips that are Asana tips. So don't cross them out immediately, but if you come across a resource that's like full of product description and all it's talking about is the product, that's probably not something that your audience would like to look at. And that's all about the techniques and criteria. So what we have to move on to is my favorite, the process. So process is probably my favorite word at work. I do love a little bit of a process because it makes life easier and work easier. And here is how we do this at Filtered. First of all, we gather the curation sources. And there are a couple of ways to do that. We can use the existing libraries, like I already mentioned, for example, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, or any other free libraries that you might find, like FutureLearn. You can ask the provider to export or obtain them from the supplier, and they will include the metadata that I have mentioned previously, and it will come along in the exported file, or you can try to curate it directly from the web. And we have two types of curation. And first of all, we have the automated curation. So we have Undersping, Pocket, Google Alerts, or email subscriptions. And those are various tools and systems that can potentially draw the content for us. And then we have the manual curation, which I am a massive fan of. And that's basically being an expert and the champion at curation, using Google searches, advanced Google searches, and finding content yourself. And why I love this one more than the automated one is mainly because I learn along. So even if I've got no clue about financial business, after I curate some content, I feel like I'm a master at finance. Okay, so once we've gathered the content, we have to analyze it. So map it to the topics or skills that we have identified as one of our drivers. We have to make sure that the content that we have is actually relevant to the audience and covers the topic that we have on the list. Once we've done that, we obviously have a massive amount of content that we not necessarily want to share immediately with everyone. We potentially want to keep something for later or just cool it down. So this means we have to remove any irrelevant assets by applying the technical criteria to them that we have spoken about initially. And once we have done it, that's it. Now we have the potential set of content to curate from. And if you have removed anything irrelevant, then we should be left with a very strong content set. If we still have an over provision of content, then we can start looking deeper into the remaining content that we have. And that's when the quality and the relevance criteria come in place. So that's when I normally spend a lot of time in, maybe not a lot of time, and maybe that's just my decision to read through quite a lot of stuff that I find, but you don't necessarily need to do that. Or skimming through the resources is more than enough to understand if it's relevant and useful for the people you're curating for. Once you are done with mapping and cooling, it's the revision time. Review your content in relation to each other. Make sure that there are no overlaps. Make sure that the skills and the topics that you thought of initially is there. Check out the formats. If you have a variety of formats, if you've got articles, videos, online courses, everyone is different, so people might want to have a choice of what they want to look at and learn from. And that's it. Once you've done it, you're ready to publish, and your audience is ready to they are ready to learn. And that's the fun process that I normally run at my business. And I hope that you will find that useful as well.
Kata, when you go through this process, let's say I can see this working really well with content that is quite shared, shared content across, multiple businesses. But have you ever come across a situation where the content needs to be a lot more specific? And how do you go about kind of trying to gather and map that out? And is there kind of space then to create as part of that process?
Yeah, definitely. We work with multiple clients that are that come from industries that are very specific. So, for example, pharmaceuticals or engineering, and that becomes a little bit more difficult to curate a freely available content. And that's when the content creation come in place. And quite often we work with content that our clients have created internally. And that's fantastic because they share all the metadata with us, and we are able to analyze it using our tools and also the content intelligence tool to understand if that resource is still relevant and informative enough to share it with the bigger audience. And yeah, that's when the whole creation comes in place. We at Filtered not always create the content. We try to curate as much as we can, mainly because we are not always experts in every field. So if we work with a client who are massive experts, as an example with pharmaceuticals, we will definitely use them as our subject matter experts. And based on that, we come up with a good bucket of content that we can then share away with departments or the whole company.
And then in this process, I can imagine when you're kind of linking out to content from different places, is there kind of built-in time to go back and review or, make sure that the links aren't broken, make sure that the content is still relevant for the skill sets?
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we perform on a quarter basis, usually at Filtered. So we run monthly analysis on the content with some reporting tools that we have, and we check if the content is relevant, if people visit the content that we offer, what providers are the most valuable to the users, what they find useful. And then based on that, we analyze if some content should be removed, if we should curate or create some more content on specific topics. Sometimes we do run focus groups with the people that use our products, or we run some surveys with them, and based on that, we constantly try to make the content that we offer as relevant as possible. And
very nice.
Thank you. And I think that's all I wanted to share with you today. I hope you will find this useful. And I will pass this over to you now, Bethany, because I know that you've got some really interesting slides to show us as well.
Well, thank you. That was really a great kind of introduction into what Filtered does. And can I just give a bit of a kind of overview with Kata, and Kata, please correct me if I'm wrong, but what Filtered does as a tool is it basically it's kind of a larger algorithm that aggregates content based on metadata tagging, and then that's something that you kind of set yourself, like as kind of in admin of the tool. Cool. Yes, and then to start feeding that algorithm, that process that you go through is something you do manually initially to kind of make sure that the algorithm is choosing the right things, right?
So we actually do, we actually work both ways. So the learning experience platform that we have is actually what you said. It's a platform, it's an engine. I love to call it an engine that recommends the most relevant content to individuals. And the way to do that is for us to tag the content in a specific and very relevant way. So we assign topics and skills or keywords to every piece of content that lands on our platform. And for us to do that is, and then the algorithm actually takes this all under account, and then it analyzes the end user by asking a couple of questions with the onboarding process. And similarly to what Netflix does, it recommends the most relevant and useful content to that user. And the curation process for us and the tagging of content can be either manual or automated. And again, we have some really cool set of algorithms that help us do the smart way of tagging. We use our content intelligence tool to do it. And with the set of keywords that we initially create for every topic and understanding the audience, we are able to tag the content in the automated way. So based on the metadata of the content that we receive, we can then analyze if the content is useful, if it's relevant to the topics that we were initially given or we set up. And in the end, the two products that we have, they land together. The learning intelligence, the content intelligence tool tags the content for us with small help of our internal curators and administrators. And then the content that is tagged lands on the platform for the client to be recommended in a nice way.
Cool. And it's something, so curation itself doesn't have to necessarily go through a specific platform, right? It can be something that's a process or kind of it's something you implement alongside your strategy?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I think that's what my kind of focus is as well, is like when I think about kind of curation, I think we kind of think that we need a tool to be able to do it. And we need to kind of go straight in with a really kind of powerful tool, which is really helpful. But sometimes, based on funding or, based on kind of other needs within the business, that's not always a reality right away. So what I wanted to kind of look at is the ways that we can implement curation in what we kind of do now, and really take those kind of first steps as well into curation, still using all of the quality and the kind of technical specifications, and even the process that Kata has showed with us, because that's a great process even when you're creating content, right? Because you gather and then you cull it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So what I did is I kind of played a little bit of an experiment, because I thought, why not, as part of this, is kind of see if I can kind of curate some thoughts on curation for our lovely webinar today. So what I did is I went to Twitter, and I have a pretty active personal learning network, which I'm very grateful for. And I basically just kind of tweeted this question, as you guys can see here. And then this is what I ended up receiving, which you can see. This is only just a bit of a snapshot of what I ended up receiving. And I thought it was a great kind of indicator of the value that curation can have, both in the way of people that are probably a lot smarter than me, providing their ideas, providing kind of what's important about curation, even providing kind of other articles that I hadn't read that would be interesting. And then kind of some of the pitfalls as well of curation potentially going bad. So I'm learning from their mistakes potentially without having to make my own. And then also kind of the social aspect of it, the way that, people have kind of come together and really provided their insights, and then added value by explaining, kind of the way they used it. Yeah, it's a rogues gallery for sure. And this is, again, just a snapshot. I thought I wanted to make sure the people who had commented actually got their 5 minutes of fame on our webinar today. But this is just kind of an example of how curation can happen, even just through social networks. I mean, if we look at kind of TikTok and how crazy and popular that is, that's, if anything, it's a kind of a curation platform where people do create, but they are, adding value or adding commentary or sharing or providing a stream of that content in a way that's relevant to them, and then maybe relevant to their followers as well. And people, in a way, are choosing to be on that kind of stream, or choosing to be a part of that conversation by liking it or following it or what have you. So that's kind of our, social learning and practice in a way. So that being said, about kind of what curation can be, I wanted to think about how we could consider curation for a learning strategy, because it's something that, as much as we want to kind of get stuck in, there's a few things that are potentially a good focus that we need to think about when we're trying to put that learning strategy together. And the first thing is, if you build it, they will come. But that's not always the case. Poor Kevin Costner in his Field of Dreams, it's not always the case. I've had the experience actually in one of my prior jobs of putting together a content curation aggregation platform. And we thought, great, they've been asking for this. This will be great. We'll put all that content out there. We'll give them access, and it will just happen. And then it didn't happen. And we were kind of scratching our heads going, oh, yes, sorry, James. But we were scratching our heads going, why was it that they were asking for this content? They really wanted kind of that further learning, that they weren't taking the opportunity to go and learn. And we kind of found out that it wasn't necessarily self-sustainable. So it wasn't something that they were kind of buying into and then wanting to add to themselves, or, you know, whatever streams that we had set up or content that we provided weren't at their point of need, or weren't something that was actually kind of based on what they needed, the skill sets that they needed to build. And then also, we didn't necessarily have the culture supporting that sharing of information. We were kind of in a place where people kind of carried their own information and shared it within their teams and the people close to them, but it wasn't a culture where people shared out the information that they gained. So those are two things to think about when kind of looking at curation in the wider scope for learning strategy. The next is quality of information. So it's really important, like Kata was saying, about kind of focusing it on making sure you're choosing the content for the skills that you need. But it's more important that you even know what are the skills that we're aiming for here. Are these things that are aligning with what our business needs? And is there relevant and specific content to be able to provide those skills? You know, are we going to see a change in behavior after the end of them moving through this content? I mean, the last kind of thing that you want is that whatever curation platform or curation that you do just ends up becoming a dumping ground of resources, because that's, you know, if it's digital or if it's on actual paper, you know, once it's kind of that dumping ground and it's unmanageable, people are not going to be able to go through it and find it at their point of need, and they're going to kind of give up on it. And then thinking about budget as well. You know, you don't necessarily have to introduce a new tool. There is some kind of breadth, and if you're gonna have a new tool and an aggregator, it will take away the amount of time that you need to put into it of trying to kind of tag and find the right resources and put them together. But then you're also talking about the costs of maintaining your team and having your team effort and time to kind of go into that. The last thing you want as well in your learning strategy is to kind of implement curation and then not have that kind of capability to go back and review it and make sure that it's still fit for purpose 3 months, 6 months down the line. So that all being said, there is still hope. I didn't want to kind of say, oh, here's some negative. There's definitely hope, and there's ways that you can implement curation, even in small ways, within your strategy or within kind of even your creation. So these are kind of those first steps that I was talking about, is you can take a resources, not courses approach. And this is kind of what we're trying to do with the way that we're setting up our flow learning. But essentially, we want to focus on creating that resource on a topic that's kind of that introduction. It tells them why it's important, why it's really valuable, and make sure that they have that freedom to explore as they feel led to or as they need to. So we create our content to kind of in a more modular format so that there's certain topics that they can go into as they need to and out of if they need to. And it makes it just a lot easier as well, so that even if you're creating that, you know, a traditional, I guess, course format, they're still able to kind of explore that at their point of need as well. So you're almost kind of getting, you know, two things for your buck, which is really helpful. And then talking about or adding further information. So we have started working on kind of incorporating curated further information pages. And this can be inside an actual resource or module, but this can also be on your LMS or on the flow management system. Basically a place where you can go, okay, these are all the links or direction to different resources that are actually relevant to the same topic. So for example, if you have a food allergens resource that is kind of that compliance module that they have to do, it doesn't mean that you can't then add, okay, how does food allergens make sense to your business article? Or here's a link to our food allergens like repository of information for our menu. Different ways that you can kind of incorporate further information and further kind of exploration into that process. And it's really, really important to evolve continuously. So anything that you're doing in terms of curation, make sure you have a setup for reviewing and updating those resources. The worst thing is when you're like, oh, I'm really excited about this. You click on the link and it's broken. It's always so frustrating. So make sure that doesn't happen. And like Kata was saying as well, it's a really worthwhile endeavor to make sure that your resources are actually up to date as well. Are they relevant in terms of timeliness to the topic that you're exploring? Another suggestion as well is using shared and common topics. So use curation to give content to learners on topics that are common across multiple businesses. You'll find a lot more content that way. The content will be more relevant and focused. And then put your kind of energy into using that for your shared things like time management and project management, things that all businesses will need to work on. And then put kind of your focus on creation into the topics that are really specific to your business, that are really the kind of needs and focuses for your business. And then that way you're getting kind of best of both worlds. So you're getting all that really great content as well as making it relevant for the really kind of important topics for you as well. And then there's ways that you can do that by using resources that you already have. So I bet you that most of you probably have a stack of content that's been created by your organization that just kind of sits there or, doesn't get looked at or only gets looked at in certain situations. So is there a way that you can utilize that in new and in different ways? So at one of the organizations I used to work at, what we did is we kind of created a course of resources, kind of linking together menu cards, recipe cards, and SOPs all into kind of one place. So in a way, we were kind of curating that library of going, if you come into this course, you'll have that library of the information that you need. And then we created a really easily accessible menu that it would be one click and then they'd find that specific resource that we need. This is really helpful information if you're going to kind of, for our hospitality kind of listeners, this is really helpful when you have new menus that you're trying to put up or, kind of new focuses or seasonal kind of drinks and things, is rather than it becoming kind of a long, learning resource of just kind of collating all of that together and letting the learner have the lead and kind of exploring that and finding out the information that's relevant to them. And then also making it really easily accessible for them to come back to and easy navigable. So based on all of those, do we have any kind of questions thus far or potential thoughts on how curation could be used in your organizations? I know I've been talking at you quite quickly. Kata, I wondered, based on some of these thoughts as well, is there ideas that you might have in terms of, for our hospitality industry, how they can utilize curation even better?
Oh, that's a really good question. I definitely think that the more you sit online and see what's there, the more ideas you have. Always remember to keep everything you've curated previously or created previously at the back of your library. You might always go back and you might always find something useful. It's like fashion, it always goes back. But I also agree with you that there are so many learning resources that or basically any resources that we have curated or created that do not get to our final end user, to our audience. And I think it's extremely important to remember about the engagement and how we approach the people that we want to share that with. Leaving that on the table will probably not make us any good. Remember to be proactive, and that will be prized at the end.
I wonder as well, I mean, everything that I've kind of read over the couple of days is about curation, of being able to add that value to the content that you're presenting, you know? I mean, the idea of a really good librarian is that they have that kind of, or even a book, like a bookstore, is that they have that bit of, you know, these are the books that we recommend, or these are the resources that we recommend. And that's kind of really that important piece, right, in curation is, so you don't have to kind of keep scanning Google or scanning, you know, all of the bookshelves to find something that you might find interesting. You actually have that kind of closer. All right, so we have a question from James of how would you convince someone that curation is not cheating in terms of content production? Kata, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think you need convincing. To be honest, I'm already very convinced. But if I were to speak to someone who still is not big fan or a beginner with curation, I would say that we have to think about all the authors that we know that are extremely well known or less well known, and it's just there. Like it's like going to school and reading all of the novels and all of the published all of the published articles that our teachers ask us to read or consume. It's the same rule. Like someone has written something or created something, and it's just there. And it's not like they come up with some silly thoughts in their heads. If it's there and if it's in well-known source, that's definitely worth a read, and not always very relevant, but basically what I'm trying to say is that whatever has been published and is in a place where that you can trust, it's definitely worth a consideration for curation.
Yeah, I kind of think about it in the way of if it's been said by someone who is, you know, that subject matter expert in that area, or has that really great experience. I mean, we learn through kind of each other, right? So in terms of that content production, could we sit there and kind of try to say the same thing again? Possibly we could try to create that ourselves, or could we lean on kind of that expertise and that experience? And to me, I feel like it has that more value if we are to lean on that expertise and experience. And as long as we are using it in the right way, so making sure that we are following the copyright and you know, referencing when we've found, you know, a specific thing or a specific article, or Kata, like your system does, going straight to the source in terms of linking them, then we're doing that kind of that original writer's justice in that process as well. And there's, you know, nothing to be said that could not be that kind of initial step into the content, and then you can kind of add value and add your experience on top of that as well. That even kind of brings it, you know, more full circle.
Creation is sort of a curation process as well. I would add to that just quickly, because when you create something, you have to do some research. You need to know what you're writing about or creating your visual resource about. So there is always this element of curation that you are doing behind the scenes that people might not know about. But I think only people who write diaries write about themselves or whatever happened, but that's not based on curation but experience. All the rest is somewhere there already, because we are content overloaded.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you for that question. And yeah, definitely, it's the art of curation is that packaging and making it obvious to the learner of why that's going to be relevant for them and what value that they're going to get out of that. Thanks, James. So kind of moving on, I wanted to present to you a bit of scoop, a little bit of exciting new information. Talking about curation, we at Flow by Mapel have also been looking at how we can, provide curation with the products that we provide as well. And you saw earlier that we are focusing a little bit more on those resources rather than courses kind of format to our, all of the kind of learning resources we put together, which sits primarily with my team. My team is sitting there researching and bringing content together on a daily basis. That's what we do. But we're also launching some new features on the Flow platform that will allow you to use curation in your organization as well. So in the coming months, our Flow module manager will, you'll have as an admin the ability to load up many different forms of content, whether that be PDFs, audio, video. So more so than just, your initial kind of SCORM modules, you'll have that ability to kind of upload resources as and when you need to. And that can kind of give you that ability to take your learning from courses to resources, like I said before as well. So you can create that learning path based on not just a course, but a course and the resources that you need to provide. Later this year, we're also developing and continuing to develop our bite-sized learning. So we are working kind of on reworking a lot of our main module content, but we're working on creating some bite-sized learning as well. And even our main module content we're developing so that it can be consumed in more of a bite-sized manner. And then by the end of the year, we're launching our own curated and verified content surface that you can then enable for your organization as part of the Flow platform, where our team will, or my team most likely will be doing that research, making sure that it's curating the content that's really relevant, putting them into streams, and making sure that they're verified, relevant, and will be helping kind of build those skills that your business needs. And then we'll also be setting up with the platform that fostering that learner-led exploration through a user interface that's updated to support tagging, like that metadata that Kata was talking about, and improved search functionality so that your learners will be able to explore the content that you upload or that we put up as the curation service, and then also be able to find it at point of need by searching through that. So just a bit of scoop that'll start kind of coming out in further detail as and when the dates are specified for each of those, but just a bit of scoop into kind of where we're going here at Flow. And I'm personally very excited. Also, kind of excited and also like, that's a lot of work, but we're happy to kind of move forward with that. And then what I wanted to do as well is to give everybody so that you have that kind of curation knowledge that you've gained now from Kata and myself, but also to help kind of move your personal learning on as well. I've curated a couple of resources and put them together here, so we'll make that available after the presentation. And it's really great kind of podcasts, articles, all about how to use curation and how to put it as part of your learning strategy with L&D from a lot of great minds. And then I've also kind of, in my way of trying to add value, given a wee breakdown of why I thought that each of the resources were valuable. So we'll pass that around a wee bit later on. But then I think that's kind of come to the end of our presentation today. So we have a bit of time, and I was wondering if there was any further questions that people had. Was there anything on my presentation, Kata, that you wanted to ask?
There was nothing from my side. I just wanted to say, like, if you are having any questions or would like to talk about curation or creation, just reach out to both of us, and we are always happy to talk.
All right. We are super thankful for everybody that's tuned in today. We really appreciate the time that you spent. And if there's any kind of further questions or comments, or if you just want to have be a part of that conversation further, please definitely connect with us. either through Twitter or LinkedIn, or kind of following Flow Training or Mapal Group or filtered _tech for more information about curation. And we're always happy to have that conversation. We hope that you got some value from today, some hopefully added value from the curation, and we'll make sure that the slides and the further resources are provided as well. And with that, I think I will say have a good morning or afternoon now. Thank you, guys.